Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel. Today, I'm bringing you a video filled with tension and intense emotions. The story revolves around a young child, the son of Tieu and CEO Hoai, who suddenly faces a critical incident that directly threatens his life. At a moment when all hope seems to be fading, Hoai appears and becomes the one who saves the boy's life. So what exactly happened, and how did everything unfold? Let's watch the full video today to understand the whole story. Time has passed far more quickly than Tieu ever imagined. In the blink of an eye, Kevil is already 4 months old. The small house that once held long stretches of silence, loneliness, and emotional wounds is now filled with familiar sounds of a happy family. There is Ivy's soft laughter whenever she notices her little brother stir, Kevil's innocent babbling in his father's steady arms, and peaceful afternoons when the whole family gathers together, saying very little, yet clearly feeling the calm and warmth that surround them. Despite his busy workload, packed schedule, and endless meetings, CEO Hoai always makes every effort to return home on time. To him, the moment of seeing Tieu and the 2 children after a long day has become the most important part of his life. Tieu, too, has gradually grown accustomed to her new rhythm, a mother of 2, a complete family, days passing by in a steady and gentle flow. At times, as she stands watching her children sleep peacefully, she can't help but think that perhaps happiness is simply this. But none of them could have imagined that such peace was so fragile, delicate enough that a single unexpected event could shake everything. It all began on a night that seemed completely ordinary. Kevil suddenly developed a high fever. At first, Tieu tried to reassure herself that it was just a common illness in young children. She checked his temperature, wiped his body, and gently soothed him, hoping the fever would soon subside. But as time passed, not only did Kevil's temperature fail to drop, it continued to rise minute by minute. His cries grew weak, no longer loud or firm as before. His lips gradually turned pale, his breathing became rapid, and panic began to take hold of Tieu. She held him tightly in her arms, clearly feeling the unnatural heat coming from his tiny body. Her heart raced, each beat heavy and urgent. At that moment, her mind was consumed by nothing but a growing sense of fear. "Hi, something's wrong," she whispered, her voice trembling, almost breaking. The moment CEO Hoai placed his hand on his son's forehead and felt the dangerously high temperature, he stood up immediately. The expression in his eyes shifted completely, from concern to tension and decisive resolve. "Get things ready. We're going to the hospital. Now." There was no hesitation, no room for doubt. The once quiet house suddenly filled with urgency and weight. Every movement happened in silence, broken only by hurried footsteps and the strained breathing of adults desperately trying to stay calm in the face of a situation they had never expected to confront so soon. The hospital was brightly lit in the middle of the night. White lights poured out from long rows of glass windows, cold, sterile, and eerily silent. The hallway echoed with the hurried rolling of a gurney, the rapid footsteps of doctors and nurses cutting through a space that was usually accustomed only to the stillness of midnight. Kevil was taken straight into the emergency room. The door closed firmly behind him, shutting his family off completely from whatever was happening inside. Tieu stood frozen in the corridor. Her hands trembled uncontrollably, fingers tightly interlocked yet still shaking. Her eyes never left the closed emergency room door, as if staring at it could somehow keep her son safe. Every second felt suffocatingly long. She couldn't bring herself to sit down, nor did she have the strength to move. She simply stood there, motionless, as if all the energy had been drained from her body. CEO Hoai stood beside her, trying to maintain a calm exterior. But his hands were clenched so tightly that his knuckles turned white, his nails digging deep into his palms without him realizing it. His gaze was fixed on the same door, filled with tension. Images kept flashing through his mind. Kevil's tiny body in his arms just hours earlier, still babbling softly, still moving ever so gently. The sudden turn of events left him completely unprepared. After a long series of tests, the emergency room door finally opened. The doctor stepped out, his expression more serious than usual, his voice lowering as he spoke. Just one look at his eyes was enough to give Tieu a terrible premonition. "The baby is showing signs of a blood-related condition," the doctor said slowly, each word weighing heavily on the air. "He is currently suffering from severe anemia and needs an urgent blood transfusion to stabilize his condition." Tieu's ears rang. The sounds around her faded away, leaving only a few words echoing in her mind. "A blood transfusion?" She repeated it almost instinctively, her voice small and hoarse. To her, it was a concept both unfamiliar and terrifying. She had never imagined that her 4-month-old baby would have to face something like this so soon. The doctor continued explaining, but what made the atmosphere even heavier was the next announcement. At that moment, the hospital's blood bank did not have enough compatible blood to transfuse Kevil immediately. Time was not on their side. Every passing minute could directly affect the boy's condition. Tieu's nearly collapsed. Her legs went weak, her body swaying as she held Ivy tightly in her arms to keep herself upright. Her heart clenched painfully, fear flooding her chest until it became hard to breathe. Before she could even think of what to do next, CEO Hoai sprang into action. He immediately pulled out his phone and began calling everyone he knew, relatives, friends, anyone at all. His voice was low but urgent, desperately asking them to come to the hospital for blood testing, clinging to the hope that someone might be compatible with Kevil. In the middle of the night, the phone rang endlessly. Some calls were answered right away, others had to be dialed again and again. Anyone who could come rushed to make arrangements. Gradually, more exhausted and anxious faces appeared in the hospital corridor, all sharing the same heavy sense of worry. Amid the overwhelming panic, Tieu could only hold Ivy tightly against her chest, feeling the small warmth of her daughter as her only fragile source of support. She lowered her head and whispered softly, as if trying to comfort herself more than speaking to her child. "Your little brother will be okay, won't he?" Her trembling voice dissolved into the cold hospital air, carrying with it a faint, fragile hope that struggled to survive through these tense moments with no clear end in sight. Near dawn, when the sky outside was still wrapped in a pale gray haze, the hospital corridor remained brightly lit, heavy with exhaustion and tension. That was when Hung arrived. He walked quickly, his face clearly strained despite his effort to remain composed. Walking beside him was Hawa. Both of them seemed to have rushed straight from home, barely having time to straighten their clothes, yet the worry in their eyes was impossible to hide as they scanned the hallway, searching for Tieu. The moment Hung spotted his younger sister huddled in a corner of the corridor, holding Ivy tightly in her arms, he hurried over. He didn't need to ask what had happened. Tieu's pale face and reddened eyes told him enough. Hawa stood just behind him, quietly taking in the scene, instantly sensing the heavy atmosphere that hung over the place. She didn't ask many questions, only listened as the doctor briefly explained Kevil's condition and the urgent need for compatible blood. As soon as the doctor finished speaking, Hawa did not hesitate. She gave a small nod, her voice unexpectedly calm. "Take my blood for testing." Her words were not loud, but they were clear and resolute. Tieu turned to look at Hawa, her eyes filled with a mixture of hope and fear. Hope, because there was finally another chance for her son. Fear, because she knew donating blood in such a situation was no small matter. In that moment, Tieu could only tighten her grip on Hawa's hand, her lips trembling, unable to say a single word. The wait for the test results felt suffocatingly slow. Every passing minute stretched endlessly. Hung stood beside Hawa, his eyes fixed on the door of the testing room, torn between worrying about his nephew and worrying about the woman he was about to marry. CEO Hoai stood farther away, arms crossed over his chest, head slightly lowered, the tension never leaving his face since the moment he entered the hospital. Then the doctor returned. He glanced around before his gaze settled on Hawa. His voice broke the silence of the corridor. "The compatible blood donor for the baby is Ms. Hawa." In that instant, all the emotions that had been held back throughout the long night seemed to burst at once. Tieu broke down in tears. She raised her hands to cover her face, tears streaming down endlessly. Tears of relief that her son now had a chance to live, and tears of deep emotion at what Hawa was willing to do for her family. Tieu stepped forward and wrapped her arms tightly around Hawa, her whole body trembling as she cried, whispering words of thanks again and again through her tears. Hawa was taken into the transfusion room shortly afterward. She lay still on the bed, her arm neatly positioned, her face showing a hint of fatigue yet maintaining a calm composure. When Hung stood beside her, holding her hand with worry-filled eyes, Hawa simply smiled faintly and spoke softly. "It's okay. The baby needs it more." Those simple words made Hung choke up, his throat suddenly dry. He squeezed Hawa's hand more tightly, as if trying to give her some of his strength. Her blood began to flow through the tube, slow, silent, yet carrying life itself. Each drop was quiet, unassuming, but immensely precious, connecting two lives in a moment filled with tension and hope. Outside the room, Tieu leaned against the wall. Both hands covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking uncontrollably. Tears fell freely now, no longer held back. Through the small glass window, she saw Hawa lying there, saw the long transfusion tube, and within her rose a depth of gratitude so overwhelming it could not be put into words. CEO Hoai stood beside Tieu, silently bowing his head low. In that moment, all distance and all words felt unnecessary. His voice dropped, hoarse with emotion. Thank you so much." Hawa heard him. She simply turned her head toward the door and gave a faint smile. It wasn't bright or showy, but it was enough to make the hearts of those standing outside tighten, a quiet warmth lingering at the fragile boundary between worry and hope, silently yet unmistakably present. After the blood transfusion, Kevil's condition gradually began to stabilize. The rapid beeping of machines that once made everyone's heart race faded away. The constantly fluctuating numbers that had forced everyone to hold their breath finally settled. The pale color on his lips slowly returned to a healthy pink, his skin no longer felt as cold, and the heartbeat displayed on the monitor became steadier, slow, clear, and reassuring. These changes were small, yet they were enough to offer a fragile ray of hope after such a long, tense ordeal. The doctor came out and announced that Kevil had temporarily passed the critical stage. However, his tone remained cautious. The baby would need close monitoring, long-term treatment, and there could be no room for carelessness in the days ahead. This was not the end of their worries, but at the very least, that fragile little life had been preserved. Tieu was allowed into the room. She held Kevil in her arms, so carefully it was as if she hardly dared to breathe. Pressing her cheek gently against her son's forehead, she felt the familiar warmth return. Kevil's breathing was steady, weak, yet undeniably real. Tieu's throat tightened, tears spilling over as she found herself unable to speak. All the fear, despair, and tension that had been bottled up throughout the long night finally had a chance to break free. In that moment, Tieu understood very clearly. If it hadn't been for Hawa, she didn't even dare to continue the thought. The realization made her heart ache, filled with both pain and overwhelming gratitude. From that day on, Hoai came to the hospital frequently. Her presence was never loud or intrusive, nor did it carry any sense of formality or awkwardness. She came naturally, as if she belonged there, a familiar figure in a space usually defined by the hum of machines and the sharp scent of antiseptic. Hoai didn't come merely to visit, she stayed, truly staying, helping Tieu care for Kevil in every small detail. She helped change his diapers, her movements gentle and careful. She prepared his milk, checked the temperature, held Kevil in her arms and softly rocked him when he became uncomfortable. Everything Hoai did felt effortless, not clumsy, not hesitant, as though she had been caring for a child like this for a very long time. At times, Tieu would stand and watch, a feeling rising in her chest that she couldn't quite put into words. Once, Kevil cried non-stop. No matter how long Tieu tried to soothe him, he wouldn't calm down. Hoai quietly stepped over without saying much, simply asking to hold him for a moment. She drew him into her arms, gently patting his back with slow, steady movements. Strangely enough, after a short while, his cries softened and then faded away completely. Kevil lay peacefully, his breathing more even, his tiny hand lightly clutching the edge of Hoai's sleeve. Tieu stood not far away, silently watching. Tears fell from her eyes without a sound, unnoticed by anyone else. It wasn't jealousy or a sense of being replaced. In that moment, Tieu understood her feelings perfectly. It was deep gratitude, a quiet, powerful emotion stirred by the sincere care Hoai showed toward Kevil and toward her family, without expectation, without calculation. Amid the hospital's lingering anxiety and the long days of treatment still ahead, the image of Hoai holding Kevil in her arms, gentle and unassuming, etched itself deeply into Tieu's heart as something she would never, ever forget. One afternoon, when the hospital's frantic rhythm finally began to slow after hours of prolonged tension, the surrounding space seemed to settle into silence. Footsteps in the corridor grew sparse, and the machines in the patient room continued their steady, monotonous hum. Kevil was asleep. His sleep was no longer restless or startled like it had been in the days immediately after escaping danger, but deeper, more complete, so peaceful that anyone watching hardly dared to breathe. The late afternoon sunlight slipped through the tall window, falling at an angle onto the cold tiled floor, forming thin yet warm streaks of light. It wasn't harsh, just gentle enough to soften the familiar chill of the hospital. Tieu sat beside the bed, holding Kevil in her arms. She cradled him so lightly she barely dared to move, afraid that even the smallest motion might disturb his fragile sleep. Kevil's steady breathing brushed softly against her chest, his tiny face relaxed and serene, so different from the terrifying moments before, when he had hovered on the fragile line between life and death. Hoai stood nearby, leaning lightly against the wall by the window, quietly watching the mother and child. As Tieu's older sister, she didn't need to ask many questions or express anything overtly. Her presence at that moment was like a silent but solid anchor, unassuming, unobtrusive, simply there. Since Kevil's crisis began, Hoai had almost always appeared at the right time, in the right place, doing what needed to be done with a rare calmness, never hesitating or weighing gain and loss. Tieu slowly turned and looked at her sister for a long moment. Her eyes held too many emotions intertwined: exhaustion from sleepless nights, lingering fear, relief that her child had survived, and above all, a profound gratitude she didn't know how to put into words. She reached out and took Hoai's hand. That familiar hand was still warm as ever, the same hand that had held hers throughout the years of growing up, but now it carried a very different meaning, the meaning of quiet sacrifice. Tieu's voice trembled, so soft it nearly dissolved into the stillness of the hospital room. "You didn't just save my child. You gave him another mother." As soon as the words left her lips, Tieu could no longer hold back. Tears slipped down silently, soaking into her shoulder. No sobbing, no sound, just the delayed release of everything she had forced herself to contain for so long. To Tieu-san, Hoai was no longer just her sister. In the days when Kevil hovered between life and death, she had unknowingly become a strong, protective embrace, someone who stood between Tieu-san and her deepest fears. Hoai gently shook her head. She squeezed Tieu-san's hand lightly, the gesture subtle but reassuring. Her eyes softened, her voice calm and slow, carrying no pride and no claim to credit. I'm not replacing anyone. I'm just your sister. And someone who was here when Kevil needed it. There was no grand declaration, no emphasis on sacrifice, just a simple statement, entirely true to who Hoai had always been. Yet it was precisely that simplicity that moved Tieu-san even more. She stood up and embraced her sister tightly. The hug wasn't rushed or dramatic, just two sisters leaning into each other, sharing a chapter of life they both knew would stay with them forever, impossible to forget no matter how much time passed. Outside the hospital window, the afternoon sunlight continued to fall gently, neither harsh nor brilliant, just enough to soften the heavy air. Kevil slept peacefully in Tieu-san's arms, his small face pressed against his mother's chest, far more at ease than in the days before. Nearby, Hoai stood quietly, her gentle gaze resting on her nephew. She didn't need to say anything or step closer, just standing there was enough. A child who had once stood at the edge of life and death, who had thrown his entire family into panic, helplessness, and fear, was now surrounded by the love of a family willing to do anything to protect him. A mother, an aunt, and arms that would never let go, even in the most fragile moments. But Kevil's journey of treatment is not yet over. The days ahead still hold silent challenges, worries yet unnamed, waiting along a long road whose end is not yet in sight. Stay tuned for the next episode to continue following the difficult journey of Tieu-san's family.
Xin chào tất cả mọi người đã quay trở lại với kênh của mình. Mình muốn biết nội dung cho video tập mới. Hẹn gặp lại ở mọi người những video tiếp theo. Tạm biệt.